Good afternoon and welcome to today's installment of the Boost Your Skills webinar series, where we enlist the advice of specialist experts in order to help you make the most out of your university experience and to acquire the skills to help you succeed and develop both professionally and on a personal level. I'm Stothart, and joining me today is Jenny, and we are your Boost Your Skills team. Our guest speaker today is Catherine Stothart, who is a leadership coach with Airbus and a partner in Google's Mastery faculty of visual facilitators. One of Catherine's many areas of expertise is in group work and how to make it as efficient and smooth as possible. Group work is an essential part of university life, and its importance only increases as you enter your career. So today, Catherine is going to help make group work for you. This event is in webinar format, so you will not be able to turn on your cameras and mics, but we would still love to hear from you through the chat function. This is a safe space with no judgments being passed, so please feel free to ask any questions without fear or worry. If you are still anxious, feel free to message myself or Jenny anonymously, and we will pass it on. This webinar will consist of a 45-minute session followed by a Q&A session, so please send any questions you have into the chat box, and we will attempt to get through all of them. The event is being live streamed to our YouTube channel, so don't worry if you've missed anything. We will be sharing a link to the video and the slides after the event. Finally, thank you to all our attendees who pre-submitted questions for us. So to start things off today, we would like to hear a little bit about yourselves and what you're looking to get out of today's session. If you could just use the chat box, that'd be great. And I'll kind of start. I enjoy working in groups and I enjoy working with people, but I think one of my main issues is communicating, and sometimes I get too wrapped up in things that I'm doing and I forget to tell people where I'm at or how far I've gotten, and I don't think that's very helpful when you're working in a group of people. So I think that's something that I'm hoping to try and figure out, and I'm sure Catherine will be able to help me. But if anyone has any sort of stuff that they're trying to get out of today's session, we'd love to hear from you.
I think that communication is the biggest thing, isn't it? It's always the one that seems to go wrong. So yeah, any tips? And I know Catherine's got loads of tips coming up, so that one for me is a big one. Yeah, and I've been thinking about sort of what sort of teams that you would be doing group work in, because there's obviously the obvious ones of university, but then you can have things like even with your family, if you're planning a wedding, that's group work, or in any kind of job has group work. There's so many places where you need to work with people and things can go very wrong very easily. So and we know from the questions at the beginning of the event, before people registered, that there's a lot of people asking what to do when it's gone wrong. So yeah, we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, I think, oh, we've got someone saying how to break the barrier. So I think, is that, we'll have to, maybe can someone, that whoever said that, expand on that maybe. But yeah, to break the barrier, that's an interesting one. Maybe the sort of barrier of communication again.
Oh, we've got another one here, which is how to get the group to work when people in the group are not meeting on any specified premise.
That is a big one, I think. So that always a problem, isn't it? There's always someone that's working harder than someone else.
Yeah.
Or someone has a problem that someone doesn't know about. So yeah. Or there's someone else saying, I love working with people, but I'm never sure how to work with people with mental health problems. That's a good point, as they are not straightforward and often behave in unexpected ways, and I'm never sure how to deal with this, to be honest. Yeah, that's a big problem, that I suppose, in that you're just not sure how to expect what, you know, so what behavior to expect on that front. And then we've got, I'm a first year student and we have a group work assessment in S2, and I realized I need to get some tips on how to give my best in the group. Oh, I like that. So you also wanted to come in to make sure that you give your best. That's really nice to see, because most people, I think, are sort of thinking, oh, how can we all work together? But you're also going in with a really positive attitude, so that's really good.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you for joining in and sort of giving us some insight into what you're hoping to take away from it. I'm pretty sure that all of this will be covered in some way in what's coming up. So over to you, Catherine.
Okay, thanks, Jenny. And hopefully, Jenny, you can hear me, can you? And you can see me?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, that's a good start. And thanks, everyone, for putting some comments in the chat there on what you hope to get out of today. So as Stothart said, I'm a leadership coach with Google and with Airbus. I'm also the author of 3 business books. The one on the left is an ebook. The one in the middle, How to Get On With Anyone, is the book that I'll be drawing on today for this talk. And the one on the right is the book that's coming out on the 7th of November. That's my latest one. Before I became a leadership coach, I used to do a lot of recruitment. So I've recruited people for all sorts of organizations, companies like AstraZeneca, Lloyds Banking Group, Waterstones, Fujitsu. And when we used to recruit people, we'd always ask some sort of question around team working or collaboration. So we'd ask something like, can you give me an example of a time when you've helped a group achieve results? And then I'd ask something like, well, what difficulties did you have to overcome? And what I found was that people were often saying how difficult it was to work in a group. Maybe some people weren't pulling their weight or not turning up for meetings or not doing their actions. There seemed to be a lot of difficulties, which is a pity because working in groups, team working, collaboration is a skill that employers really look for and really value. So I hope that today you'll get some tips, even if you only go away with 1 or 2 tips, but I hope you'll get those, and that will make your experience of working in groups, a much happier and more successful one. So I want to start by doing a quick poll. And Stothart will put this up in a minute, but basically I want to get a sense of, in order to get your assignments done, how much do you have to collaborate with others? Never, sometimes, often, always. So there's the poll.
So we've got two in the lead here. So I think we've got everyone's.
Yeah,
we've got some people voting. So 60% are saying often at the moment, and 40% are saying sometimes. So yeah, that's an interesting one. So often, that means got to do a lot of group work.
Yeah. So I think, Stothart, if you end the poll, I think everyone will see the results. I'm not quite sure if you want people to. That's it. Yeah. So everybody who's here today has to work with other people sometimes or often. That's great. I'm going to just get that one off my screen, and then I've now got another poll for you then, which is if you have collaborated with others, and that's just about all of you, how did it go? Very well, okay, could have been better, or badly?
It's either extreme at this point and then could have been better. Oh, okay. Could have been better is in the lead, though, it looks like.
Yeah. So 55% of people are saying that, yeah, it could have been better. A few saying badly, and some saying very well and okay. So that's great, because obviously some things then are going right, which is really good. Thanks for that, and thanks for doing that, everybody. So that gives me a sense of, the fact really today that what we're going to talk about is important, is relevant to you. I'm just going to get the poll off my screen. There we go. So what am I going to cover today? Well, I'm going to start with my 3 Ps model of effective group work. So that's looking at what's the purpose of the group, what are the processes by which we'll make this group work, and what are the personalities involved in the group. Then we'll go into a little bit more detail on your own style of interacting with others. Then some very specific tips on listening, putting forward your points of view, asking questions of others, and managing emotions. And as Jenny said, a little bit of time for discussion and question at the end. So that's the plan for today. So let me start with what is a team? So my definition of a team is, it's a group of people with common goals requiring interdependent action to achieve them. So in other words, you have to work together, otherwise you won't achieve the result that you want. So I'd like to ask you to pop into chat, what's been your experience of, slightly different question. If you think about great teams, which teams spring to mind? So if you think about, somebody says to you, what great teams do you know? Which teams actually spring to mind? And just pop things, your ideas into chats. Netball team, yeah, brilliant. Liverpool, yeah, I thought we'd have some football ones in there.
Yeah, well, I can say Arsenal now, thankfully.
Yeah, well, I'm wondering if anyone will dare say Manchester United, but yeah, Foo
today.
Fighters, okay, so that's a band, I think. Sri Lanka cricket team, yeah. Medical teams. Okay, so yeah, exactly. So I love the examples you've put in there. And when I ask this question of teams, people often mention sports teams, musical teams, orchestras or bands, or emergency services. And what's special about all those sorts of teams, social work teams, another one just coming in there. Yeah, what's special about those sorts of teams is that they usually have a very clear goal. They've got something very clear that they're trying to achieve, and they're all invested in achieving it. So if it goes well, they all succeed. But if one person fails, they all fail. And everybody knows their role in the team. So, you know, if you're the goalie of a football team, you know exactly what you're meant to be doing. If you're the lead violin in an orchestra, you know exactly what you're meant to be doing, what part you're playing. So being clear on the goal of the team and your part in it is a really important basis for an effective team. And I'll come back to that point a little bit later. So I want to ask you another question, which is, what are the benefits of doing something in a team rather than individually? So what are the benefits of doing something in a team rather than just doing your own individual work, assignments, and so on? Oh, it takes less time, synergy, shared responsibility, guidance and support, collaboration. You get support when you're struggling. Everyone's got different expertise, different perspectives, bring out good ideas. Yeah, I love all the things you've said there. And you're absolutely right. You've got more knowledge, expertise. You can share the workload, different ideas. Wonderful. Yeah, so there are big benefits of working in a team. And there's a couple of quotes on this next slide that illustrate really, I think, some of what you've just said. There's a quote there from Darwin, you know, collaboration is essential for us to continue to survive effectively. And a quote from Ken Blanchard, none of us is as smart as all of us. So there's that idea of collectively, we have more intelligence, we're more smart than when we're each trying to do things individually. So there are big benefits of working in teams. However, there are also difficulties. So Patrick Lencioni wrote a book called The 5 Dysfunctions of Teams to illustrate really, well, he writes about the difficulties that teams have. And you can see on this pyramid, those different aspects of working in teams that cause difficulties. So, you know, the absence of trust, the fear of conflict, the lack of commitment, people avoiding accountability, and also not paying attention to results, getting so absorbed in what you're doing that you don't actually pay attention to, well, are we getting what we're meant to be getting? Are we doing what we're meant to be doing? And as he says, teams are made up of imperfect human beings. And so there are inherent problems with teams. So what I'm hoping to enable you to learn about today is how you can overcome some of those problems. And I use this model, and I've used it for many years with many different teams and different organizations. I use this model that I call the 3 Ps. And it helps you think about the different aspects of teamwork. What's the purpose of the team? Why are we a team? What do we need to achieve? Is really the starting point. Then there's, okay, well, how are we going to manage ourselves? How are we going to organize and structure ourselves? That's the processes. And then there's also the personalities in the team and what impact that has on the success of the team. So I'm going to talk about each one of those in turn, starting with purpose. And won't say too much on this one because I've already mentioned having a clear goal, having a purpose. But basically, when you come together as a group to do a project at university, just like a team in business, you have to be clear on what you're trying to achieve. How will you know you've achieved it, and what are your measures of success? So, for example, if you have to do a project, produce a presentation, produce a report, or whatever it might be, what criteria are you going to be judged on? because you need to have that in mind when you're making your plans. That is all part of your overall purpose. What are we trying to achieve and what's it going to look like? So spending a bit of time at the beginning, being really clear on that is important, and it prevents sort of misunderstandings between team members later on. So that's purpose. The second big area is the processes. So once you know what you're trying to achieve, what is your plan to achieve it? Who, and that's basically who has to do what by when. And it really is as simple as that. But yes, so a plan, what do we got to do? Who's going to do it and by when? And then while you're getting on with the work, you know, how do you share information? Things like when and where are you going to meet? How will you follow up on actions? How will you make sure that you don't get to a week before the project is due to be handed in and you suddenly realize that half the team hasn't done anything? So how are you going to monitor and follow up on actions and make sure that things are on track against your plan? How will you run your meetings? Are you going to have a chair, for example? Who can make decisions? And then, so these are all things that really you need to discuss and agree when you first come together as a group before you actually start on any of the work. And then the last point on this slide, agreeing ground rules. So this is about how are we going to behave towards each other? So teams that I've worked with in business often agree ground rules like, you know, we will listen, we will show respect, we won't be distracted by our mobile phones, we'll be on time, we'll do our actions, those sorts of things. And by having some agreed ground rules at the beginning, it means that if somebody isn't complying with those, it's easier to raise it and to remind people, hey, we said we were going to do this. You haven't been doing this. Have you had some problem? What's been going wrong? How can we help to get it sorted out? It's a lot easier if you've agreed these things up front. So that's the processes, the second P. And then the third P is personalities, because a big impact on how well groups work together is the personalities of the people in the team. And when I say personalities, I mainly mean what you do and what you say, because that is how other people judge us, and that is how people respond to us. They respond to what we do or what we say. And you're the only person that can control and change that. You can change and manage your own behavior. But it does have a big impact on how successful a group is, how well people interact. So I'm going to spend a bit more time on this point. And so when we communicate with other people, we usually have a positive intention. You know, we don't set out to be awkward or difficult or annoying. Well, I don't think we do. So we usually have a positive intention, but sometimes the way we come across can have a negative impact. So, for example, I might be working in a group and my positive intention might be, let's make sure we get it done on time. And I might be pushing for, let's just get it done, let's get it done. If other people in the group are talking, discussing, going off at tangents, in my opinion, I might start to get impatient and start to get frustrated. That will come out in how I communicate. Then other people won't want to cooperate with me. They'll get annoyed with me. They'll be upset with me because of my behavior. They won't want to cooperate. And then you get conflict escalating. So being aware of how you're coming across, so that even though you have a positive intention, being aware that actually the way I'm behaving isn't terribly constructive or helpful is really important. So what I'm going to do is give you a quick overview of 4 different styles that we tend to fall into when we interact with others. And these are in my book, How to Get On With Anyone. And each style has a positive intention, but sometimes the way they come across can have a negative impact. So there's 4 styles. I'll just speak very briefly about each one. But what I'd like you to do when I'm speaking about them is think about, well, which one do you fall into most often when you communicate with others? Which is your typical style of interacting with others? So the first one is what I call the mobilizer style. So these are people who, when there's a task or a target to be achieved, they want to go straight for it. They have this inner drive, this intention to get action, get results. They want to make quick decisions. The sort of energy they have is the sort of energy that you might have if you were in a hurry, very determined energy, or as if you're in a hurry to get somewhere. Now, they get stressed if you're working in a group. Mobilizers get stressed when nothing's happening, when people are being slow, or there's a lot of discussion going on, and then they can appear impatient and demanding, which then, as I said in my example earlier, isn't terribly helpful for constructive group work. So have a think if you're a mobilizer, and if you are, there might be times when you need to slow down to let other people have the discussion and have their own, thoughts and ideas and so on. And if you're in a team with a mobilizer, what can help them is if you say, right, we'll get to that in a minute, just give us 5 minutes to have another discussion. So that's the sort of thing you can do to help yourself and to help other people if you're working with a mobilizer. Of the 4 styles, 2 of them tend to be people that speak as they're thinking. The other 2 tend to think first and then speak. So the next style I'm coming on to is one of the ones that tend to think first and then speak, whereas the mobilizer will just speak and get started. So for these people, the navigators, when there's a task or a target to be achieved, they like to work out a plan for how to get there. And they tend to think before they speak. So other people can sometimes think that they're not very interested or not very involved. So their inner intention is to get that plan. Let's get a course of action. Let's work out how we're going to achieve this project. They like to make decisions in a sort of calm and thought through manner, and they have very focused energy. They can look quite serious, quite intense, the sort of energy you might have if you're revising for an exam. And they get stressed when there isn't a plan, when they don't know what's going to happen, and people are just rushing off and doing stuff without a proper plan. And when they get stressed, as I said, they can sit back, they can appear tense, distant, and look like they don't want to get involved. So if your style is a navigator, what can help you is just to relax and smile a bit more. And if you're working with a navigator, tell them what the plan is. Tell them that you appreciate the need for a plan. The next style, the 3rd style, is the energizer style. So these are one of the 2 that speak as they're thinking. For them, when there's a task or a target to be achieved, they want to get people involved. They've got lots of energy. They like to make collaborative decisions. They're very engaging. They want to bring people together. It's the sort of energy you would have if you were hosting a party. You'd be there, you'd be bringing people in, chatting to people and so on. So again, it's a positive intention, but sometimes if they get stressed, they can go a little bit over the top and become a little bit unfocused or a little bit frantic. And they get stressed when they think other people don't want to be involved. So if you're an energizer, you can help yourself by sometimes saying, right, just calm down and listen to the others for a bit. And if you're working with an energizer, show a bit of enthusiasm yourself, and that will encourage them and keep them happy and stop them getting stressed. And then the 4th style, the synthesizer style, this is one people who like to think first, then speak. Now, when they've got a task or a target to achieve or a project to achieve, it can look as though they're meandering around. Because they like to think about it, they like to gather lots of input from other people, they like to gather lots of information to make sure they've considered absolutely everything and you're getting the best result possible. And that's their intention. And they tend to be quite consultative. They tend to have very approachable energy, the sort of energy you would have if you were listening to somebody, and they do tend to be quite good listeners. They get stressed when they don't have enough opportunity to give their input or enough time to gather everything, or enough credit for their efforts, because often they're the people that do a lot of stuff behind the scenes and their contribution can be overlooked by others. And when they get stressed, they can come across as a little bit unassertive and indecisive. So if you're a synthesizer, one of the ways you can help yourself is just to try and be quicker with things, I guess, or just focus on being assertive and saying what you want. And if you're working with synthesizers, then, ask them what they're thinking and ask them to summarize their opinions. That's something that can help them. So that was a very quick run through of the 4 styles. There's a lot more to it than I've just said, but hopefully you can recognize either in yourself or other people how these styles come across in meetings and in groups, or even socially when you're out with friends. You know, some people will say more, some people will say less, some people will take more of a backwards seat and be thinking, while others are there at the center being very sort of energetic. So I'm going to ask you to have a guess at what style, or what style you think you adopt most often when you're working with others. So I'll just
give a quick reaction, wasn't it? Everyone,
yeah, a few people
to vote there.
Yeah, few people very decisive. And while we're waiting for those polls to come in, somebody's asked, can people be hybrids of these styles? Yes, I would say we're all a mixture, but we do tend to have one that we naturally default to. But having said that, you can be in any style. As I said, you know, if although I may not be a natural energizer, if I'm hosting a party, then I'll be behaving like an energizer. I may not be a natural navigator, but if I know I've got a project to achieve, like writing my last book, then I will work out a plan of how to get there and think it through carefully. So we can adopt different styles, even if it's not our most comfortable style. Oh, right. So we've got, from the people that have answered this poll, and we can perhaps share the results if you want to, there's pretty even spread. And that actually is good news, because really we need all of these 4 styles. So if you think about it, you need the mobilizer who wants to get pushed through and get the action done, get the results. You need the navigator who wants to work out the plan of how to get there. You need the energizer who's going to get people involved and enthusiastic. And you need the synthesizer to make sure you've covered all bases and gathered all the relevant information and input. So it's great to have a mixture of styles in the team. The difficulty comes when, because these different styles have different priorities and different perspectives, that's when you can get conflict. So, for example, you know, the mobilizer who wants to rush ahead gets a bit frustrated when the navigator wants to say, hold on, let's have a plan. Or the navigator gets a bit frustrated when the energizer is creating a sort of bustling, noisy atmosphere when they want to be quiet and think. So there's lots of scope for conflict between the different styles. But at least being aware of your natural style and what helps you, and being aware that other people are different, and although they might be annoying you a little bit, they actually have a positive intention. They're trying to do something good for the rest of the team. Knowing those things can help you to work more constructively and productively. Another question, is there one style that's significantly better at teamwork? Not really. You'd sort of think, well, maybe the energizer is. So, but I would say, no, they all bring different things, and they're all things that you need. Where the energizer is particularly helpful is bringing in people, seeing that, oh, so-and-so could help us with that, or we could go and talk to that person over there. They're good at that. But then you need people to analyze that information and make sense of it. And you need people to not lose the focus on that target, that date, that deadline. So you really do need all the styles and all the perspectives. And even if you have a natural style yourself, sometimes consciously thinking, hang on, in this situation, I need to behave a bit more like a different style, that can be helpful to know. Okay, so that was a very quick run through of the different styles that we tend to fall into when we interact with others, and how those different styles can annoy other people when we're working in teams, and can lead to some of those dysfunctions that Lencioni talks about. And I'll come back to the emotions a little bit later on. But of course, once you get conflict between people, that's when the emotions get involved, and then things can escalate quite quickly. And that's obviously something that you want to avoid happening, because you want to have a constructive and productive team. So I'm going to go on now to the third area of my agenda today, which is talking about some very specific skills for working in teams. And those are listening Advocating, that's how you put across your own perspective. Asking questions of other people in a way that gets the best response from them. And managing emotions. So I'm going to say a little bit about all of these, and then we'll come in towards a little bit later on, we'll open it up for more questions and general discussions, so on. So let me say something about listening first. So there are levels of listening, and you can see at the bottom there, level 1 that I call superficial listening, and we all do superficial listening. And I've attended webinars myself, and I've done a lot of superficial listening, and I'm probably some people today are doing what I would call superficial listening, which is, getting distracted by other things, maybe a little bit tuned out, half listening, half not listening, looking at your mobile phone and all those sorts of things. Listening to what's going on in your own head. You might be thinking about what I've been saying, but then that leads you on to some other thoughts. You might be thinking about your next assignment. You might be thinking about what you're going to have for your tea tonight. All those sorts of things stop us being good listeners. So to be a really good listener in a group session, in a group meeting, you need to move up a level really to what I would call focused listening, where you really are listening to the other person. You maybe repeat back some of their words, some of what they've said. You maybe paraphrase it a little bit to make sure you've understood it correctly. And also because that helps them know that you have listened. And you might be asking open questions to find out a bit more about their perspective, their ideas, their thoughts, and so on. And level 3 listening, which is even more difficult, is actually picking up what they're not saying. So it's noticing more the tone of voice, people's facial expressions, people's body language, and responding to that, hopefully appropriately. And we do actually pick up people's tones of voice and body language very easily, but we're not always aware that we're picking it up. And what tends to happen is we react to it without really consciously thinking about, hang on, what is this telling me? What's the best way for me to respond? So, for example, if I said to somebody, if somebody brought a report to me at work and I looked at it and I said, oh, that's a great report. That's really good. Hopefully that comes across positively. If I said exactly the same words, but in a different tone of voice, if I said, that's a great report, then you would know, same words, but completely different meaning because of my tone of voice and the expression on my face. So we do pick up these things, but we often don't think about, hang on, what's this telling me and what shall I do? And, showing empathy to the other person, that's another aspect of level 3 listening. So it is hard to fully listen to other people, but it is worth the effort. And particularly when you're in your groups discussing the projects or whatever, listening well is really important and will get you dividends. Second skill I mentioned was advocacy, advocating your own position and perhaps inquiring into the other person's position. And this comes from, I think it's Stephen Covey, it could be, who wrote the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People some years ago. So he talks about people who are low in advocacy, in other words, not very good at advocacy or inquiry. They might state their conclusions. They might tell you what they think, but without giving you any examples, without giving you any explanation. They might be just looking for you to agree with them and not disagree, not challenge. And they might ask you leading questions. Things like, I expect you're going to go to that lecture next week, aren't you? That phrasing would be a leading question. People who are high in advocacy and inquiry are much more likely to explain why they think what they think. They're much more likely to give examples, much more likely to ask your views, probe your thinking, share reasoning, and encourage challenge, people who are comfortable with challenge. So, just think about how you put across your own point of view and how well you listen to and ask questions about the other points of view when you're working in a team or in a group. So that brings me on to asking questions. And I mean, these are the, simplest words in the English language, probably: who, why, what, when, where, how. And they're really powerful powerful words. The ones at the bottom of this pyramid, who, when and where, are typically quite factual. You know, there's you ask one of those questions and they're not emotive questions. They're quite factual. People will give you a factual answer. The ones in the middle, what and how, are really effective ways of asking questions to get people to engage with you, to discuss with you, to give you an answer that, you know, is open and honest and so on. And if you have been interviewed for jobs or whatever, you'll find, well, the good interviewers ask a lot of questions beginning with what and how. I put why at the top there because why is a little bit different. And I'd like you to put into chat what you think might be the reason for me saying that for me suggesting that asking questions beginning with why can be problematic. So why is asking questions beginning with why a little bit difficult sometimes, a little bit problematic? It's an analysis question, yes. It forces people to sort of analyze and explain. Yeah, what else? Can be taken as an accusation, yes. So people can feel a little bit threatened. If you say to them, well, see what people might get defensive. Why has more subjectivity or variety of opinions? Yeah, good answers there. And you're absolutely right. If you say to people, you know, why did you do that? Or why do you think that? They automatically react quite defensively, which means they then spend time explaining to you and justifying and rationalizing exactly why they did it or why they think it. And they sort of go down, they narrow down into a bit of a hole. What you want is people to open up and really have an open and exploratory discussion. So asking them, what makes you think that? Or what made you do that? Is much less threatening, and you get much more of an open discussion. Just seeing what else people have put into. Yes, it's a bit demanding, seems elitist, or it shifts onus. Yeah. So yes, so asking questions beginning with why. So if you're in your meeting with the people that you're working on your project with, and you're asking people, well, why do you think that? Why haven't you done that? You know, try and step back a level down to what and how. You know, what stopped you doing that? How do you think we should go about that? What might be a better way of doing that? They're much less threatening and you get much more open and honest discussion. And I'll just add one other point while I think of it, which is when you're disagreeing with somebody, don't start your sentence with but. So if somebody says what they think and you say, yes, but I think blah, 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 that immediately, but is like waving a big red flag. It's like saying to somebody, I'm going to disagree with you now. What's better and more helpful is to, when somebody says something, is to say, and I think blah, blah, blah. So it's just that little bit less of a red flag that you're in a disagreement. It's adding something rather than opposing. You're building something together rather than being at loggerheads. Never wave a butt in someone's face. Yes, good point there. Yeah, and Mary, some people do like questions beginning with why. I do myself. I like to understand things. I like to understand the reasons why. But if you ever try it out with your friends, say, you know, if you're out with friends, just asking people why, and notice the difference if you ask them a question beginning with what, and you might find it actually is more constructive and productive. I once asked a friend who was moving house, you know, why are you thinking of moving? Because they had a lovely house and I didn't know why they would want to move from there. And she immediately became defensive. Whereas if I'd said, oh, what's made you think about moving? That's much less threatening, much more constructive, really. Right. So my fourth point I said I was going to talk about for working in groups is managing emotions. So we are human beings, although we think we're up in our heads, we're rational and so on. We have a big emotional element. The more primitive part of our brain kicks in before the more rational part of our brain. So when something happens, so if I don't know, you know, you may or may not drive a car. When I drive my car, if somebody cuts me up on the road, my immediate reaction is to hand on the horn or make a rude sign or whatever. That's an emotional reaction. That's my brain reacting emotionally, when actually calming down later on, I might think, oh, why did I do that? You know, that was my next door neighbor. Why did I do that? Why wasn't I more calm, and so on? So we all have emotions all the time. And especially when we're working in groups with other people, all sorts of emotions come in. You know, we do get irritated, annoyed, frustrated, angry, sad. I'd like to think we're sometimes happy and joyful when we're working in groups as well. But we do have these emotions. And so, you know, you need to be able to notice, oh, I'm getting frustrated, I'm getting irritated, before it comes out in your behavior. So, you know, typically we blurt something out and then think afterwards, oh, I shouldn't have said that. So the trick is to be aware that, oh, I feel a bit tense, a bit anxious, or a bit frustrated. Hold it there, stop. And before you say something, you know, think, hang on, how shall I deal with this? So managing your emotions is a really important part of working constructively in a group. And I'd like to ask you, and perhaps pop into chat, what can you do if you are aware that you are becoming a little bit upset, angry, or whatever with somebody when you're working with them? What can you do about it then, at that moment, you know, in the moment? What sort of things can you do to calm yourself down, diffuse the emotions? Yeah. Deep breaths. Yeah. That's a good one. Pause. Yeah. Count backwards. Yeah. Is that 100 down to 1, or maybe 10 down to 1? Step outside, take a walk. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, deep breaths and be quiet for a moment, some grounding, focusing on something else. Yeah, fantastic. I mean, all these things, take a sip of water, time out, absolutely. And they all sound dead simple and easy things, don't they? But how often do we do them in the heat of the moment? So again, it's about training yourself to be aware and then do one of those things. Even just, you know, walking out of the room, walking around the corner to get a glass of water, any of those things enables you to calm down and think, hang on, how do I want to respond in this situation? So I love all of those ideas. And the deep breathing is really important to calm yourself down. So we often breathe quite high in our chests, especially if we're nervous. So, you know, up there. What you need to do to calm yourself is breathe lower, more in your sort of abdomen, if you like. And that does actually help you calm yourself. And not just in the sort of situations we're talking about in groups or whatever, but also if you're making a presentation, maybe you've got to stand up in front of the team. Maybe you've got to go and have a discussion with a lecturer, whatever it might be. If you feel nervous, do half a dozen deep breaths, and it really does calm you. I play tennis, and if I do a fault or a double fault, I quite often, when I'm picking up the balls ready for my next serve, I quite often do some of those deep breaths to calm myself, relax myself, and then invariably I find that my next serve is a good one. So it really does help you in all sorts of situations. Right, so that was quite a quick run through of quite a lot of material. I hope you found some tips that you can take away, including the very simple ones that we were just discussing, and, you know, the and, not, but, and those sorts of things. But basically what I've talked about is the importance of having an agreed purpose when you're working with a group, the importance of having processes, understood processes for, you know, what's the plan, who's going to do what by when, how will we communicate, who can make decisions, how are we going to follow up on our actions, all those sorts of things. And the importance of being aware of the personalities in the group and how you can help people to get on with each other, basically, by how you manage your own behavior and how you respond to what might be driving their behavior. And then we've gone on to some very specific tips about listening, questioning, and managing emotions, and so on. So this is almost my last slide, which basically, you know, even Henry Ford knew it was difficult to work in a team, but if you can, you know, overcome some of the difficulties, you will get really good results as an effective team, and get better results, hopefully, in any projects that you're working on at uni. So I think I'm more or less exactly on the time that Stothart said at the beginning, so I'm going to give myself a pat on the back for that. And really, it's over to any questions, discussion, and so on.
Thank you, Catherine. I suppose we could start with a few of the pre-submitted questions, and then we can move on once people have had a think about what sort of questions they want to pop in the chat. So we had a few pre-submitted questions, and I think most of them are in relation to communication, really, from what we've been talking about before. So there's a few where, so there was a question about what do you do, or how do you behave in a relationship, a working relationship, when it's damaged beyond repair?
Ooh.
And also, how can this be avoided in the first place? Do you want to stop sharing your screen, and then we can...
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure what I'd done. I did actually click on something, and I wasn't sure if I'd stopped sharing or not. Right, I've stopped sharing now,
yes,
have I?
Yeah,
great,
perfect.
Good, okay, thanks, yeah. Oh, right, so you said a relationship that's damaged beyond repair, and how can you prevent that happening in the first place? Well, I hope that what I've said will enable you to think, how can you prevent that happening in the first place? And often it will come down to that interaction between people. You know, you've got one style, they've got a different style, you've got different perspectives, different priorities, and a bit of conflict occurs. So trying to be more aware of how you're coming across, and also responding to what they might need from you, as we said, is something that should help that relationship from deteriorating. If you've already got to the point where it's beyond repair, I mean, I would like to think that no relationship is ever completely beyond repair. I think what you have to do then, though, is agree on what is your common goal. What is it that you've got to work together for, to do? You know, what is it? You know, if you say you are working with them on a project, you need to sit down and say, well, hang on, you know, we've got this project to do by such and such date. We need to both, you know, work together on this, or we need to be able to cooperate. What can I change about the way I approach things to help you? And I'd like to share with you what I think you could change to in how you approach things that would help me. So there's also that little model. It doesn't always, it might be appropriate, might be not. There's this little model of stop, start, continue that people in business sometimes use when they want to have a difficult discussion with somebody, where they sort of will say to the other person, you know, well, you know, Jenny, I'd like you to stop interrupting me at meetings. I'd like you to start listening a bit more, but I'd love you to carry on with your friendly, helpful manner. So, you know, it's that may or may not be appropriate, not sure. But really, if you've still got to work with that person because you've got this joint task to achieve, then you do need to sit down and have that discussion with them. You know, what can we do to make sure we get on well enough to achieve the goal? Because that goal is important for both of us. You have to have a common goal that's important to both of you, really.
It's a hard one, isn't it? And that conversation is a very hard one to have, but I think once you do have it, you do feel better afterwards. It's very nerve-wracking putting yourself on the line like that and having a difficult conversation. And I think a lot of people, so one thing we talked about, and it's a question as well in the pre-submitted questions, is if someone has a problem that's been affecting their work, a lot of the time people don't talk about that until they get to the point where there's no return, and then have to say what's been happening to them. And by that point, it's almost too late to be able to help and step in and say, actually, we could have taken some of the workloads from you. So it's about that sort of agreement at the beginning, I suppose, like you said, about sort of agreeing to communicate if you have issues, and having those checkpoints all the way through, so that you know if someone is struggling, that you can ask that question of what's happening, what's going on, rather than a why question, and to get to the bottom of it before it's too late, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about, as you said, if you've got those checkpoints, if you're coming together and somebody hasn't done whatever it is they're supposed to have done, then saying to them, have you had any problem, or what problems have you had? You know, what stopped you? How can we help? And then maybe, you know, you find that particular task somebody else can pick up in the group instead. But if you run up to the very end and discover that the person hasn't done what they're supposed to, then that's really difficult for everybody.
Yeah.
people generally, I've found in my working life, people are quite helpful and understanding to each other when they know that there is a problem.
Yes, but if you don't know, you're not psychic, are you?
Yeah,
So,
no, that's right.
We've got someone saying thank you very much for the presentation, and this has been really great information, but how does it really help if some of the group members haven't attended the webinar? Well, we are actually recording this webinar and we will be sharing the video after the event. So if you are going to be working in a group and you want to set that as a precondition of your group work, then you could agree to all watch this video and use it to help you guide your way through your upcoming project. So just a thought on that one. And how do you work with those who only want their voice to be heard? So I suppose that might be a motive. So one of the people that's more sort of outspoken and sort of
yeah, probably someone who's more outspoken. Again, it's difficult to give a clear answer when every person can be different, every situation can be different. But I think there are times when you have to say to people, hang on, you've spent 10 minutes talking about what you think. Everybody needs to have a say on this. You do sometimes just have to be firm, or you have to say what you need, and you have to be really clear. I want to share my opinion with you. Are you prepared to listen for 5 minutes? I would probably, with someone, the tone of this question suggests that it's someone who's really difficult. I would probably be as blunt as that. It's in everyone's interests to get the group to work well. If you've got this common goal to achieve. If you haven't got a common goal to achieve, you don't need to get on with everyone. And the title of my book, How to Get On With Anyone, it's really about how to get on with the people you need to get on with. You don't have to get on with everybody in the whole world all the time. And you will always come across some difficult people. So then when you come across a difficult person at university or in your working life, you just have to think, okay, do I want to change this or not? Do I need to get on with this person or not? But if you do, then you have to initiate it, do something about it. Yeah. Which might be being assertive and saying, I need you to do this. I need you to listen to me, or whatever it might be.
We've got a few questions in the Q&A as well.
Yeah, quite a few. We will work through all of them, so don't worry. We
will
sit here and go through them all.
So the first one is actually, it's how to break the barrier. So I guess this is also about ice breaking, and especially when you first start.
That's from the beginning of the event. I'd skip to the one about what to do if you keep getting more work.
More work, yeah. So there's a question here. What to do if you keep getting more work, taking on more tasks and doing them well, but you keep getting pay cuts, and how to communicate that you're looking for some respect. So,
oh dear, yeah.
Yeah.
I would say you have to think about what you want to say. Don't blurt something out. Plan what you want to say. Plan what outcome you want. So if the outcome that you want is, my boss pays me more money, then you have to think about what you're going to say. You have to be very reasonable. You have to go along and you have to sit down and say, look, I want to talk to you about my pay. I want to talk to you about the tasks I've been taking on. When I started, my job was XYZ. Now my job is also ABC. I think that deserves more money. I think it's, but you need to take the emotion out. And be quite calm and factual and reasonable and so on. And ultimately, of course, if somebody says, no, I'm not going to pay you anymore, then there isn't a lot you can do, to be fair, other than go and find another job, I'm afraid.
And actually, there's one question that links with that, which is how to deal with the fear of communication before approaching a difficult conversation. So it kind of actually works out a bit because, so how would we...
Repeat that question for me, Stothart.
Right, it's how to deal with the fear of communication before approaching a difficult conversation.
Okay, yeah. So there's two aspects to this. One is, again, planning how to communicate what you want to say and what outcome you want. Always start with the end in mind is the phrase people use. What outcome do I want here? And then what are the best points, the best things for me to say? And the other side of it is those mindfulness things we were talking about earlier, calming yourself, deep breathing, counting to 10, playing a bit of your favorite music before you go into this difficult situation. So do those physical things to make sure you feel okay before you go and have this difficult conversation. And then, but also in advance, have sort of laid out what you want to say in a calm and logical manner. So one of the things, there is a model that I use, and it's in my book that's not out yet, the motivation book, called the deficit model. And it's where you describe to somebody what the problem is. You give them some evidence, some examples. You tell them what the impact is on you of this, whatever the difficult situation is. You tell them how you feel about it. And you say to them, look, I want us to change something to make this work better for us. But it is actually a little model, a little template to actually plan. And when people have used it, yes, they're nervous beforehand. None of us like to have a difficult conversation. None of us like conflict. None of us like falling out with people. But often once you've got something off your chest in a calm way, and you tell people how you feel about something, people are often surprised to hear how you felt about something, but often then they want to help usually. If you go in raging and arguing and shouting, you don't get anywhere, in my opinion.
So we've got another question, which is how to become more assertive instead of always playing small and putting yourself down when working with a CEO and other teammates. And this person's actually added a follow-up to it, which is that they asked the question about that because they're a young person who was promoted to being a manager and has faced this and thinks that other young women also face this situation. So it's kind of a two-part. So so I'll give it to you together.
Yeah, okay. There are lots of books on assertiveness, actually, and probably stuff you can look up on the internet on assertiveness. And being assertive, so it's not being aggressive, it's being clear about what you need and your rights, if you like, as well as being clear about the other person's rights and sort of respecting those. It's about having an adult conversation. And it's really about saying, I would like such and such. I think such and such. I would like you to pay more attention to me when I'm speaking in a meeting. I would like you to not talk over me when I'm speaking. Whatever, obviously I'm making up these examples, whatever the specific situation is. But I would say look up some books, some information on assertiveness. There's a very old book that I bought myself years ago when I was I was a manager in my 20s at ICL, computer company now owned by Fujitsu. And I worked, in fact, most of my career, I've mainly worked with men, but I bought the book, A Woman in Her Own Right by Anne somebody. It's on the bookshelf behind me there. So that's quite an old book now, but it was really good. And I'm sure there are more up-to-date books. So just find ways of phrasing things so you can go and, say what you think. But I have to say, sadly, there are some people who can be just a bit arrogant, particularly people who've been in senior positions for a long time. Sadly, it seems to be part of human nature that once people are in a senior position for a long time, the power seems to go to their head sometimes. So, I don't want to gloss over or minimize that. So I don't know if I fully answered that question. I do think it's hard for women. I think every woman finds her own way. So for me, it was about being businesslike and professional, and and thinking about, what do I want to wear? How do I want them to judge me? And I wasn't a woman who wanted to, wear stiletto heels and so on. But it all depends on what you're comfortable with, really. So I'm just looking at this. Oh, a woman in her own right. Anne Dixon. Yes, thank you, Mary. Yeah, fed up with not being chosen. Wow. Yeah. That's a great story, Millie. That is great. Yeah, and I guess people are, as I said, people often don't realize the impact of their behavior. I once, without mentioning any names or any companies, a few years ago, I was coaching somebody, senior person in an organization, and he was a bit of a bully, unintentionally, actually. And we were away, and I hadn't really seen this too much, but we had a team building a couple of days with all his team, and I just noticed some of the things he was saying to one or two members. At my next coaching session with him, I just told him what I thought about that, and separately, I told one of his team I said, why don't you go and tell your boss how you feel about it? And he did. So he went to his boss, he told him how he felt about some of the specific things the boss had said to him at this team building event. And the boss stopped it completely. And I followed up later and said to the guy, did that solve it? And it did. The boss was actually quite shocked at the impact of his behavior. So, people aren't always aware. We all think we're the center of the universe, and we're not. We're the center of our own universe, but everyone else has their own universes. So people aren't always aware. And I just come back to, you mentioned icebreaker. So although that was an early question, I will just comment on that. When you first come together as a group, do something like share something about yourself that nobody else knows about. That can be really powerful, and it might be, I played in the county hockey team, or, I once, did a bungee jump or whatever it might be. But that sort of thing can break the ice. Share something about yourself that nobody else here knows about. Another thing that can enable people to know each other is bringing an object that means something to you. So I've run team building sessions where everyone starts, they just bring something along. It could be a piece of stone or a bit of jewelry or a cuddly toy or a tennis racket or whatever, but just an object that means something to you. And why you brought it. And that really does help to break the ice, and it enables people to get to know each other as people, as individuals, rather than just other people they've got to work with to get this project done.
I've got another question here, actually, which is people with disabilities may not quite understand key emotional and other types of cues. So is there any advice you can give on that?
Yeah. Well, I'm certainly not an expert at all in anything like, people with Asperger's or anything like that. I really, I'm not an expert in those areas. My general advice is just ask people or say something. So, for example, if, I think there's something happening here between me and this other person, but I'm not sure what it is. It might just be worth saying to them, what are you thinking at the moment? Or is there anything you want me to do that I'm not doing? Or how do you feel us working together is going? Is there anything you want me to do differently? So, and also the other thing about, body language and tone of voice, you have to be careful that you don't misinterpret it. So, the people say, she had her arms folded. She was being defensive. Well, actually, I might just be cold. Or people used to say, I don't know if people do still, they used to say, if somebody rubs their nose, they're lying. Well, that might be true, but it might be just that I've got an itchy nose. So even, it's dangerous to make any assumptions really about body language or tone of voice. It's always better to say, what are you thinking about that? What are your thoughts about that? How do you feel about that? Just ask the open question, I would say. Yeah, as Mary there said, we have to be considerate and not assume.
Yeah. We've just got a couple more questions. So one is, what if you're dealing with an unreasonable person? How does someone move along without burning bridges?
Well, I suppose the first question is, are they being unreasonable? Or are they just seeing it differently from you? And maybe the first point might be to try to understand their perspective, try to understand where they're coming from on it. If ultimately somebody just won't listen to anything and wants to go their own way, then, well, maybe let them.
Right.
Which isn't always going to help if you still have to work with this person. I appreciate that. We can't always solve every problem. It's good if it's good if we can solve as many as we can, but sometimes you have to accept, I'm never going to get on with this person. I once years ago I worked for Ford Motor Company. My first few jobs after leaving university actually were at Ford, and one of my managers there, I just couldn't get on with. So eventually I left, and because there was no real alternative. I mean, unless he'd left and gone somewhere else. So, you don't get on with absolutely everybody. But all of the sort of things that we've been talking about help a hell of a lot. and make it a lot easier. They oil the wheels, they make it easier and give you much more chance of getting on with the maximum number of people, or at least the people that you have to get on with in order to do your work or do your project or whatever it might be.
Absolutely, definitely. We've got one more question, which is, any advice on making monumental big decisions that affect a team?
Talk to other people about it, off the record or whatever. Canvass other people's views, maybe people that you trust, other colleagues, peers, even people outside work. Because I've often found in my life that talking to other people about things helps in that problems suddenly become smaller. They don't seem so big. When you're trying to deal with something by yourself, it can seem like a massive problem and you imagine all sorts of things can go wrong. But once you talk to a few other people, then it becomes more manageable somehow.
Yeah.
So that's probably my decision, my advice. And also talk to people if you can. I mean, it may be something confidential. You may not be able to talk to people in the team that's going to be affected, but if you can talk to people in the team, again, I would do that. Just sound people out. I'm thinking about such and such. What are your thoughts? What might be the problems, and so on. But involving people is always worth it. Involving people, hopefully, before the final decision is made, or involving people. Okay, this is the decision, but there's different ways to get there. So involving people in that process to get to that decision and implement whatever it is, perhaps.
Well, it looks like that's the last of the questions. And if I'm being honest, that was immensely helpful for me. I think I've been sitting in furiously scribbling away at notes and all that. So I'm going to use a bunch of these things. And thank you so much, Catherine. It's been amazing to sit here and listen to everything.
Yeah, definitely. I just wanted to add on quickly to any students that are having to work in group work for university. Don't forget that you have support structures there that are there to help you. So if you are struggling, there's your lecturers, there's tutors, there's probably even mediators and mentors that are higher up students that have been through it already. So there's a lot of people on campus that are equipped to help and support you. And all you need to do is ask. So if you are getting to the point where you are not functioning as a team, then reach out and ask someone for help, because that's what they're there for.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the key word, communication. No matter what it is, just let someone know, and that's probably the easiest way out of it. But yeah. But again, thank you so much to everyone that attended. Thank you again, Catherine, for coming along and sharing your words of wisdom. They've been fantastic. And once again, this is going to be live streamed to YouTube. So we will be sending out a YouTube link as well as a PDF with the slides, so you can go through all that. There's a link in the chat for Catherine's book available to purchase. And once again, yeah, thank you for coming. We will be having more events as they come along. So keep an eye out in your mailbox, keep an eye out everywhere. Follow us on social media, and thank you all and have a great Wednesday.
Thanks, Siddharth.
Cheers. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.